the co-chairs for the commission, and I'll hand it off maybe to you, Julie, to introduce yourself. And I'm a community representative, and then just have you introduce yourself and who you represent. And we'll go around the table.
Okay. Hi, I'm Julie Horntvedt, and I represent the North Dakota State Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Great. And I think anybody who's on, it's just a good way for us all to know who's on and who's here, even if you're not a commission member. But if you are a commission member, just tell us who you're representing.
Are we just doing a little free-for-all here, Wally, or are we going in order? Sorry, I might have missed that part.
Well, it just depends what we're seeing here. My list has Doneen Feist. Are you there? You want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Doneen Feist. I'm the Director for Family Voices of North Dakota.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then next on my list is is your name, Janet? If you want to introduce yourself.
Janet Johnson. I'm the Olmstead coordinator.
Okay. Kirsten Dvorak, are you with us?
I am. I am the executive director of the ARC of North Dakota. I am not a member.
Okay, well, thank you for attending. Senator Lee, you're next on my list.
Judy Lee, representing District 13, which is part of West Fargo in the Senate.
Great, thank you. Alicia Miskog. Representative.
Thank you. I'm Representative Lisa Mitzvah, serving District 25, which is southeastern North Dakota, and I serve on the House Appropriations Committee.
Thank you. And Nicole Maddock, next on my list of folks. If you're with us, Nicole, you want to introduce yourself? Right, well, we'll move into Rebecca Quinn.
Yeah, I'm Rebecca Quinn, and I am with the Center for Rural Health at UND School of Medicine and Health Sciences, and I serve as the director of the North Dakota Brain Injury Network and the QSP Hub.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Jacob Ruder.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm work for the Department of Health and Human Services, working on our Transition and Diversion Services pilot project.
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to skip you, Nathan, for a second here, and then go to Kayla. If you would introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kayla Trespass. I'm the Money Follows the Person Program Administrator with the Department of Health and Human Services.
Thanks, Kayla. And Veronica. You never last in the list with the name with the Z that starts with a Z, are you?
I'm maybe a little bit used to it, but Veronica Zietz, the Executive Director at Protection and Advocacy, and I represent P&A on the commission. And we have also in the room with us Becky Rosenkrantz, who takes our minutes.
Great. Thank you. And the newest soon-to-be member of our commission, Nathan, you want to introduce yourself and the couple departments that you head?
Yeah, thanks, Wally. Good afternoon, everyone. Nathan Swihovic. As of June, middle of June, Governor's interim general counsel, still keeping the labor commissioner with the Department of Labor job duties as well. So kind of pulling double duty here. And I think, I assume I'm going to be on this commission from the governor's office. But my guess is, with the new EO coming out, that's probably where that fell through the cracks. So a wannabe member at this point. But funny enough, when this was being drafted, way before Ryan decided to move on, I had recommended that the Labor Department be one of the state agencies that comes to these meetings, because we do handle disability discrimination in the state. So it's a topic that I'm pretty passionate about, and directly relates to the stuff we do at Labor Department too. So either way, I was coming to these meetings, but happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. And you mentioned the EO, and for those acronyms, that's the executive order that it's being currently worked on. A number of us may be under term limits, and that's being considered. And Nathan is helping with those the workings about what comes next for us. So, and as I was mentioning earlier, anyone whose term may be over on the commission, each of us serves until such time as our successor is named. That's kind of where we're at right now. And if there's anything else you want to say about that, Nathan, about the executive order, what's going on with that might be appropriate.
Yeah, and I know I'm on the agenda for that down the road, I believe. Right, Jana? If I can wait till then or handle it now, however you guys prefer.
I guess
on the agenda.
Yeah. You're number 4.
We missed one in intros. Jennifer Henderson is also on. If you want to introduce yourself.
Let's see. Well, that's fine. We'll let you handle it at that point, I guess. So, so thank you all for being in attendance and being with us today. And we'll certainly at the end of the meeting, we always have a public comment time too. So if we haven't visited with you before then, we have that opening for further dialogue at the end of the meeting. We'll go first then to the approval of the agenda that's been circulated and also posted. I guess I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
This is Veronica. I'll move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
This is Julie. I'll second that.
Thank you, Julie. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the agenda is approved as submitted. And then we've also circulated and posted the minutes of the May 8th, 2024 meeting. And hope everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at those. And if there's any corrections or substitutions or whatever, let us know that. Otherwise, I'd open the floor. The motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
This is Veronica. I'll move.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that again. It's Julie.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Is there any further discussion? Okay, then all those in favor of the minutes as submitted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, the minutes of the May 2024 meeting, they are approved. Now we can get down to you, Nathan, to talk about the commission planning and the executive order and other things that are going on. And since you replaced Ryan, and I guess Ryan had an offer he couldn't refuse, he went back to a company I worked for a number of years, Basin Electric, and he's heading up the government relations for that organization that distributes electricity and generates it for nine different states. So he's got quite a job in front of him, and we wish Ryan well. But we're glad to have his replacement, Nathan, with us today. And if you don't mind, Nathan, if you want to bring us up to date on the planning that you've been doing and working with the governor.
Yeah, thanks, Wally. I'll comment on that. Ryan was a phenomenal at handing things off as best he can do that. He wrote me in on kind of where this had gone as far as Olmstead's concerned prior to getting there, and so I had a background coming into the role. I apologize, it's taken longer. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this one. And so we've had several drafts go around, and while it's not strictly confidential, there may be some things I can't answer questions on right now, but I'll give you guys an idea of kind of um, where it's probably going and what some of the rationale is behind that. So essentially, it's going to be a brand new EO, but it's going to look very similar to the one that was in place back in 2018 that you guys are all currently appointed under. The terms end on the 2018 EO. And so we needed to get one while the EO itself is still in effect until a new one comes in. These terms were ending. So we wanted to get a new one in place. Some of the rationale was there was an even number of commission members. So we added an additional public member that we'll have to fill as well to get potential ties, not to prevent that from happening. There was also, I think, generally the approach to any executive orders that have been coming out for these kinds of things where there's appointments is to broaden the categories because we've seen, I guess, historically that there's been when we have really narrow categories, it's oftentimes hard to get someone to fit that description for a board appointment. So that's kind of been a thing that's been happening in the governor's office with new executive orders on different boards and commissions. And so the terminology of it is of who can serve is wordy, probably in my opinion. But I think you'll see when you see the final draft that it really, everyone here, it essentially applies to every one of you. So how this will operate is when that does go into effect, it essentially, it completely overrides the prior existing EO. So they'll have to be brand new appointments. And so you guys will all get letters that say, thanks for your service. New EO is going into effect or went into effect. Please reapply so we can get you appointed to positions that you're on with this. Restarts the clock on term limits because it is a new EO, it's a new time frame. So those of you that had served your 2 terms will be eligible to serve the additional 2 terms in this new EO. My understanding of kind of what had happened before I stepped in was we were running into this. We needed to stagger the portion of the board members because, or the commission members, because we were getting it where everyone's time was coming up at the exact same time. So we were needing all new appointments. And so we wanted to kind of stagger that so that we're not just getting a whole new crew in all at once, once those terms are up. The only positions that won't have two the term limits are going to be 2 3-year term limits. But the only ones that won't have that are the judicial, legislative, and governor appointments. They can serve as long as they are appointed by their appointing authority. So it's when you first read it, you might need to get out a whiteboard and start diagramming what is all going on, even though it's going to essentially operate. But just look at it this way: it's the initial appointments of this EO are weird in terms because it needs to get that staggering happening and started. After those initial terms, it should just be as normal, up to 2 3-year terms at a time moving forward on a rolling basis. So it's section 4 or 5, and we can talk about it later too at a different meeting, is essentially going to be null and void once we get through those initial terms that are creating the rolling effect, the staggered effect. So the other thing my understanding is there was some concern about, what is the scope, the purpose, and how far should the commission go as far as what they can, should, or shouldn't do. And so I think that's clarified as well in the new EO. And really, it's nothing, to my knowledge, no different than what you guys have kind of essentially been doing. So while it seems like there's this big, massive change happening, it's really not. And the only thing that's different is there aren't specific agencies or organizations delineated in that thing. It's more of a category of a type of person. So everyone here still qualifies. It just, the intent is to broaden that so that we aren't limiting the pool of who can be on the commission. I'll try to answer any questions, Jennifer, if you have any. And maybe you want to run, I don't know how formal you guys are, Wally. Do we want to run it through you as the chair?
We're fairly informal.
Okay.
We've usually had a pretty good order about how we proceed.
Okay.
I can certainly, when I see hands raised, I can certainly look to that.
Sure.
And let's see here. I'm not getting the name. Let's see here.
Well, I see Jennifer, if we want to start with her.
Sure. Okay. Go ahead,
Hi.
Jennifer.
Yes, my question is related to, I'm a non-voting member representing a state agency. So when you're talking about any changes, you're talking about to the 10 voting members and not anything to that non-voting membership, correct?
That's correct. Members from state agencies are still going to be there as in an advisory capacity or an information sharing. Yep. Actually,
Perfect.
the only thing I changed is, again, this is even prior to Ryan announcing his leaving, his labor department is added to that list. So.
And it should be.
Yep. I agree. Thank you. I agree. I pushed hard for that one.
Yeah, considering that you represent discriminatory type of situations, it makes perfect sense that your agency is represented here. So I think that's a good add.
Thank you. Yep.
And Veronica, you're next.
Thanks. Just a question. If a few of us agencies that are currently listed as voting members, like Protection and Advocacy or the DD Council that are connected to the state, if we are for some reason like not appointed to a voting member, are you going to consider to have us as non-voting members so that we can still bring our area of expertise to the group?
I don't think there's anything other than state agencies, or the branches of government that are specifically spelled out as an organization. So, as far as are we, meaning the executive order, is that going to include those individuals, those organizations? Not specifically as it's currently written, and keep in mind, as much as I think we're at a final form, remember there are lots of people weighing in on this right now, so we'll see what happens in the end. But no, that doesn't mean you can't contribute, as a member of the public, or however, your interest overlaps with what the commission does. And I'm not saying that as any, that I have some insight that P&A wouldn't be on there. You guys very much, I'm assuming you will be still a member of this commission.
How soon do you see this coming out, Nathan?
I would say next week. I think we're going to have it finalized.
Okay. I was just hoping that we could take a look at it before next meeting and maybe even have some discussion of it if we need a small committee to take a look at it.
And I'll don't shoot the messenger here. I think the thought process is the authority of that, rests with the governor to issue that without any input if needed. So it may come out, I'm just giving you a heads up, may come out without your guys having additional eyes on it. Whether you agree with that or not, that's the marching orders I've been given. So just a heads up on that.
Yeah, the reason I was saying that is that we have people who've served a couple terms, and then, as you've indicated, everybody's allowed to reapply to continue on the commission. But if there are those who don't want to reapply, then the question is, how do we replace them in the meantime? And I'd like to get on with that process. If, I'm not saying to change the process to.
Yep, yep. And I can work closely with you guys as well to, make sure that by the next quarterly meeting, we have these positions filled. And I hope everyone here reapplies. That is, there hasn't been anything discussed that says this is about the current members. It's staggering terms and just making it more broad for others to be able to qualify for these appointments as well.
Yeah, and we have one of the community members. There's a vacancy for that position on the commission. Did you say there's going to be a third community member added?
Second. Yep.
Two. Okay. You're referring to the vacancy that exists right now, then?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Nathan? We're glad to put him on the hot seat to get him comfortable with this new position here. So
I'll just leave you with, again, don't shoot the messenger here. All right.
No, we appreciate how challenging these are, because we're not the only commission that the governor has to work with. I'm sure you've got dozens of commissions that have some of the same issues. So.
Yep. Yeah, and thank you guys for letting me update you on that. And to the extent I can be transparent and share information, I will.
Okay. Anyone else have anything else they'd like to say before we move to the next agenda item? Okay. Well, we'll invite you on the next topic, Julie, if you would take it over on the Bridging Aging and Disability Grant.
Sure. The council applied for a grant, a small grant that is federally funded through the Administration of Community Living, and our council's National Association, NACDD, is kind of the grant holder of these funds. And so far, there are 13 states in a cohort that received this money to try to find gaps in services or issues, trying to solve problems for people who have disabilities that are aging. So that's why it's called Bridging Aging and Disability. And North Dakota applied, and we did receive that funding. And we have state partners in the work. So P&A, the DD Council, and Minot State at our university center, our USED, is the 3 state team leaders. And we've organized a group of, I think, around 12 agencies that are with us in this work over the next couple years. We have people from MFP, Aging Services, our tribal liaisons, nonprofits, other family service agencies, centers for independent living, etc. We've been getting together monthly. And we're building right now a work plan of what we'd like to look at or accomplish over the next year. And I can share that here. My computer's been kind of slow today, so you're gonna have to bear with me. So here is our proposed work plan of things we want to do. And like I said, there's not a lot of money attached, but we want to look at updating some HHS, Aging Services and Developmental Disabilities brochures into other languages and plain language. Part of our work too is looking at kind of disparity groups or micropopulations within the disability community that might be further marginalized or have less outreach towards them. So part of our goals too are to really hone in on like our new Americans, our Native American tribes, African Americans, and refugees that are in the state that have disabilities to make sure they're aware of what services are out there and see what supports they may need. There's other, we also are working with our tribal health liaisons to try to have them update those fact sheets of services that are out there to culturally appropriate language. Oh, sorry, Senator Lee, I think your hand's up.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask a question when you get to the end of your presentation. That's okay.
Oh, okay, sounds good. And we want to make sure that supports that are out there for services are known. So again, how do we update these brochures, these fact sheets? We would like to do outreach by going to conferences, using our state team members to share the resources, maybe create a new resource. And host, we've been talking about hosting training series with people that have like care for their elders and things like that. We also are thinking about targeting people who are aging at home. They might not be looped into services at this point. Maybe they're receiving services from a family member or a loved one. So how do we target those people so they know what's out there for them and planning for their future? We've also just been talking about future planning. You know, how do you set up the services you need as you age as a guardian or caregiver, and also as the person who's getting the help. We are just right now trying to, what else? Oh, the language access, provide more training. So right now we don't have it all ironed out. We've been just meeting frequently. We started our state team meetings with trainings on cultural bias, and I'm trying to think of the acronym right now. Oh my gosh, I lost it. Oh, it'll come back to me. Sorry, equity, where you got a training on bias and equity and diversity, inclusion, equity, and access. So we started with that to kind of, oh, sorry, someone say something.
Oh, I was just helping you out with the acronym, but you got it.
Yeah.
DEIA.
DEIA. I was like, oh gosh, I lost it. So we started with that to kind of set our foundation, and then now we've been talking about what we want to do. So with this work plan, we're continually going to build on it and change it because we have to have some measurables. As you see right now, we've talked about XX here, measured by X. So we don't have it all done, but the work has started. And right now we are looking at videos MFP has made that we might put into more of a regular rotation on TV or Good Health TV, that kind of thing, as well as sharing some aging resources, sheets and materials, and converting those to other languages, plain language. So that's really where it started. But I guess why I'm sharing this information is we're hoping over the next year, even just working on it and focusing on this, we can help break down some barriers or gaps that are out there and maybe find some ways to encourage people to use services or have knowledge of what's out there. And if you'd like to be a part of our state team as we talk about this, you are welcome to join us. We meet virtually monthly right now. So I can answer any questions you might have.
Julie, this is Judy Lee. And my question, or actually it's a suggestion probably, but in Fargo and West Fargo, the school systems have better than 50 languages spoken at homes of the students that are here. So just for a little input, I think you might find it helpful to visit with the people who run like the Welcome Center in West Fargo. Fargo has a comparable thing where they figure out what the needs are of the kids who are coming in and the families and how to best meet those. But for those who don't speak English, there are bilingual teachers who work with those kids while they're teaching subjects, because there's a point where they have to be able to move into the mainstream classroom. So anyway, you may have already thought of this, but they may have learned some things that would be helpful as you're developing some of these things, and they may be thrilled to know that there's some help from you in areas that they're struggling with. So just a thought with that. A second one is earlier today, I had a neighbor come by whose father is 92, lives with her and her husband. He should be in a nursing home, but they don't want him to go to one, and he absolutely doesn't want to go there. And they've been caring for him at home. But the VA has cut back significantly on the hours of care that are available from caregivers. And it's killing the caregivers, frankly. So my question, and we're doing something about communicating with the VA again with an appeal, but and I have no control at that level, obviously. But I wonder if we could do just a little bit more about how we might coordinate services between state services and those for veterans as well, because I want the veterans to have the services that are available to everybody in the state, and vice versa if they are veterans and don't know about what veteran services are. And we're doing a beginning of communication on that with a little task force we've got about going on here with law enforcement and hospital administrators and stuff. But I think we are lacking in connecting with the veteran service officers and perhaps with the Veterans Home and the Veterans Hospital about the services that are there and how we, the people who are working in the various state agencies and offices might be able to advise people coming in who are veterans who need services too, so that they make use of everything that's available. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer?
So I saw on your list there some information related to education on universal design, which is lovely and wonderful. And you know, we have a universal design policy in our multifamily development program. So if you could please take a look at that as you kind of look to that education to see how our manual fits in with some of that training, or if I'll ask you to, again, if we need improvements or if there's things in there that you have concerns with, please be sure to provide us some comments on that so we make sure we align with your goals there. The other part that I would like to suggest related to universal design is we could really use some help educating building associations and such to really think about that more universally and holistically as you are building new or rehabbing new properties. So if there's any way to get into the building association, the builders associations to do some education about the needs of our state's population in that area, we would really appreciate that help there. The other thing that I had is, yes, we have a language a limited English proficiency language access plan that our agency has been working on for our federal HUD programs. And I know that Health and Human Services was also working on a language access plan. So just requesting that you kind of look through those things as you're thinking about that too. So thanks, Julie.
Great. Yes, that was what we had talked about for this work, was kind of the education piece with people who are developing or building, and how universal design isn't just for people with disabilities, but it really works for people across their whole life. And that's why it's really important to know about. So we will pull you in when we talk about that and how we can do that. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the same thought we had.
Good.
Okay, are there other questions for Julie? You mentioned there's not many dollars associated with this. Are there some dollars with it?
It's $5,000 a year, and the grant will go for 3 years time, so 15,000 total. So that's why there's, we don't have a ton of money, but we can make some changes or use our partnerships like we just talked about here to spread things out, or do small scale things. But if we do larger, we would have to pull in our dollars or our partners' dollars. And we have talked about that if it comes to it, because it does align with other agencies' goals too. So that's definitely a possibility, but yeah, it's only a total of 5,000.
Okay.
Hey,
Kayla, you've got
Julia,
a question. Okay.
I think I mentioned this, but we could look at potentially some MFP rebalancing for the target years that we're talking about in regards to collaborating, and then, like you said, other partner dollars too. So
Yes, thank you.
How many partners do you see having, Julie, in this?
I think we've got about 12 other agencies on the state team. I can put the work plan in the chat, and I'll put a list of all the members so I don't forget anybody, because a lot of them are on this call here, but I don't want to miss. So I'll just put a list there. And again, if you'd like to join, or another entity who may be interested, you could send them my way and we can get them on our team.
Sounds good. Okay. Anything else in that regard? Thanks so much, Julie, for your presentation and the collaboration that's being cultivated here. It sounds good. We'll go to item number 6 on the agenda, North Dakota Brain Injury Network presentation by Carly Indres.
Yeah, and I know Rebecca's on here. I think, Rebecca, were you stepping in for Carly, or was Carly not quite available yet?
Sorry. I was not stepping in for Carly, but I can. I know that I think that you had told her a later time, maybe.
She said, well, she said 2 because she had something right up before this, so we might just need to do a little filler for a few minutes.
Either that or I can step in for her. You just have to give me a bit.
Totally put you on the spot. If anybody else has anything they want to talk about for 10 minutes.
Well, this is very off topic, but I was waiting for the end of the meeting to be able to ask Kayla. It's fun to ask this back to people. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's trespass. Just like it's spelled, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you totally would have got that. I bet, Nathan, yeah, you never get asked how to pronounce yours.
Yeah, never. I was in basic training. My name the drill sergeant was going through announcing everyone, and I knew it was coming to me because it was alphabetical. And he got to mine, and there's always this pause, this hesitation, and he just said, Russian name with no vowels. And I was here, drill sergeant. But I'm looking at your name and I'm like, I have more vowels than you, so I think that would have applied to you better.
Yeah, usually when I kind of like won a couple entries, like raffle type things, and they'll say like Kayla, and then there's like a long pause, and I'm like, that's me.
Yeah, you just start walking up once the first name's announced. Yeah.
Or see him struggle. Yeah, that's funny.
So I have to say, and Carly's on her way. I did send her a little text. But I have to say, so my maiden name is Cheney, Cheney. And when we previously had a vice president who had the same spelling of the name but pronounced it differently, you'd be shocked at how many people argued with me that I was pronouncing my name wrong. And I was like, nope, that was how I pronounced it my whole life before he was vice president. But people would say to me, oh, you mean Cheney? And I'd be like, no, I still mean Cheney. So that's how I was raised to pronounce it, but I have really never had people pronounce my name correctly and people argue and correct me on it. So it's an interesting thing how to pronounce things.
Anybody else have a name they want to talk about? Yeah.
So I think I can get started though while Carly joins us. So we are the North Dakota Brain Injury Network. So we are currently a mix of funding from state appropriated dollars through the Department of Human Services budget. And we do have an Administration for Community Living grant as well. So the two of them. We also do have a governor-appointed Brain Injury Advisory Council that leads our efforts. So those pieces. And we were developed about 11 years ago now, 12 years ago, out of the need for having a central source of information for brain injury in the state. So that was, the kind of the need, intent. Big thank yous to Senator Lee, since she's on here today. She was one of the ones that really helped us with that development of that initial funding and those ideas, and then has been a big supporter of our needs over the years. But that's what we serve. We are under contract with Department of Human Services, actually our Health and Human Services Behavioral Health Division. So right now, as I said, we have two fundings. Both of those fundings do flow through Behavioral Health Division. So Behavioral Health Division is the lead applicant as well on that federal ACL grant. But we serve as that central lead for the state. And in that role, we have the toll-free number, the website, we do all the training for brain injury, all of those pieces. And so we appreciate you having us here today. And I will then turn it over to Carly. As I said, am the director of the Brain Injury Network, but Carly is our senior project coordinator, and she's the one that's going to be leading the training today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hello. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, welcome.
Good. Thank you. Yes, thank you for having us. And thanks, Rebecca, for filling in for me there for a minute. Hopping over from the Canada meeting. Pretty exciting. They were presenting on, so it's Grand Forks. It's the Community Networking Agency or something like that. Association, Community Network Association. And they presented on they're opening a low barrier shelter in Grand Forks pretty soon. So it's kind of interesting to hear all the details on that. But as Rebecca said, I'm the senior project coordinator for NDBIN. Our website is ndbin.org. Lots of really great information on there. Feel free to explore and check out while I'm chatting even. We have an 855 number that is answered by a real live person Monday through Friday. Nikki Livdolan, she is our veteran, our resource facilitator that's been around the longest, and she lives in Towner, North Dakota, and she answers that number. And we also have kind of a generic email address you can use, and then we can kind of help funnel to the right people. We do have kind of a regional model. We have 5 staff on, myself and Rebecca in Grand Forks, Nikki in Towner, and then we have 2 resource facilitators, one in Fargo and one that lives in Lemoore but covers like the Bismarck area. So yeah, we were asked to talk about kind of just some brain injury 101 type stuff, and then we'll get into kind of some of the barriers that we see, as well as some case studies. And I'll have Rebecca help me with the case studies too, because yeah, we have kind of complex cases sometimes. But this is how brain injury is defined in North Dakota through our century code. On the right-hand side of your screen, it's pretty jargony, but basically it's saying any damage to the brain after birth and then prior to degenerative dementia. So like fetal alcohol syndrome, not technically a brain injury because that happens in utero, although there is a huge overlap of people with fetal alcohol also having a brain injury. So we do end up working with that population from time to time. But there are 2 types of brain injury. All brain injury falls under the umbrella term of an acquired brain injury or an ABI. But we have 2 types of ABIs. There's TBIs, which most people are familiar with, traumatic brain injuries, which would be from external events. So something outside of the body coming into contact with the body. We see assaults, we see falls, blast injuries from like military people, and motor vehicle crashes, to just name a few of them. For non-traumatic brain injuries, we have more internal events, so something inside the body that's creating damage. Strokes, brain tumors, anoxia. Anoxia is referring to there's a lot of ways we can sustain an anoxic injury. Drug overdoses being a really big one. Near drownings. Anytime our breathing or our oxygen is kind of messed with. Failed suicide attempts from hangings, those types of things. Brain aneurysm is a brain injury, and then infection. And infection covers quite a few things. Meningitis, encephalitis, long COVID has been shown to have brain injury in certain cases, things like that. So we work with all of the above. So we serve birth to death, and as long as they live in North Dakota and identify as having had a brain injury, they are eligible for our services. This here is the leading causes of TBI now. And as you can see, falls is the #1. And in particular, North Dakota is right on track with this nationwide stat, with falls being slipping and falling on the ice is the cause, though, typically in North Dakota that we see the most referrals from. A lot of my clients were doing very innocent things, taking out garbage, going for a walk, and slipped and fell and woke up in the emergency room. So that's a huge percentage of our population. Struck by or against is basically maybe someone hit you and then you hit something else. So I had a young lady that was playing basketball. Another player hit her and then she hit the wall. So it was the wall that did the damage. That's kind of an example of that. Lots of traffic incidents, and then 9% assaults, or you could look at it as self-defense or interpersonal violence as well. And then a lot of unknown and other. A lot of people don't go in and don't necessarily get told that they have a brain injury. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. We tried to make a similar graphic like your last one that you saw, but it's not quite as easy for non-traumatic brain injuries, and it doesn't break down with percentages quite as nicely as TBI does, but these are all examples of brain injuries as well. The biggest one on there being stroke. So we do see quite a few people with stroke with long-term effects from a stroke. Meningitis is common, but it doesn't always cause brain injury. So there's kind of some stats for you. I won't read all of those to you, but we can definitely share these slides with you as well. So the exciting part about brain injury is that since about the 1980s, more and more people are surviving their injury. We have awesome technology in place for that. We have seat belts, we have airbags, we have helmets, lots of good safety measures in place that just need to be used for a lot of the population. But a lot of these individuals, they're surviving, but then they're being treated and released from the emergency room and maybe not told you have a brain injury, or this could lead to ongoing chronic condition. And if it happens, come back. So there's a lot of people, as you see, that 2.5 million treated and released, and not necessarily hospitalized and not necessarily told they have a brain injury. So outcomes are pretty poor for that set of people. And those are the people that we tend to work with pretty post-acute, pretty far after their injury. And then you'll see 282,000 are hospitalized and 56,000 die, but we are seeing more and more people survive their injuries. So brain injury is kind of a tricky population to work with because of the uniqueness of the brain. We are all unique, we're born unique, we start out that way, and it's the same after injury too. So it's just like snowflakes. If we look on snowflakes under a microscope, every single snowflake is different. And so the outcomes and the impact that brain injury has on a survivor is very different from person to person, and requires that kind of like intensive resource facilitation that we provide because it is so unique. We can't just have like a canned model that works for everybody. Another kind of tricky part about all of this and why sometimes those snowflakes exist, or those discrepancies exist, is because of this severity continuum, which exists for TBI now. So this is for traumatic brain injury. The doctor's office is going to gauge severity by LOC, or loss of consciousness. So you can see on here, so mild, it's saying that basically 75 to 90% of brain injuries are mild, which means they had a loss of consciousness for less than 30 minutes, but 15% of those people have long-term impairments. And then moderate injuries make up 10 to 30%, and their loss of consciousness was from 30 minutes to 24 hours, but many more of them have long-term impairments. So basically, the longer you are unconscious, the more likely you are to have long-term impairments. But this is very subjective. So when we screen people for brain injury, and I believe I'll show you the screener in a minute here. We ask people this. We say, have you ever hit your head? And we give them a list of ways you can hit your head. And if so, did you lose consciousness? And people will say, yeah. And just yesterday, I screened a guy and he said, yeah. And I said, do you know how long you were out for? The first time you lost consciousness. I don't know. I was unconscious. That's pretty much what they always say. They don't know exactly. And he guessed, he's like, I think about 8 hours, because it was dark when I, went out, and it was light when I woke up again. So he guessed 8 hours. But again, it's a guess. It's very subjective. He wasn't entirely sure. And this happens a lot. So we don't always have a great gauge of the severity of the injury, as well as there is a new understanding that if you have multiple mild injuries, it adds up and it has a compounding effect to be more like a moderate to severe injury. So that's why things like this, we can compare brain injuries to lots of things, and earthquakes is a good representation. And I know LA just had one right this week, a 4.4. And so that would look somewhere in between both of these, but this is a perfect example of brain injury too. So with a major earthquake like that top picture on your screen, as well as a severe brain injury, there's going to be skull fractures and hemorrhages and penetrating wounds. And if that person gets a CT scan, it is going to show up like, yes, you have a brain injury for sure. Well, unfortunately, we have mild injuries or smaller earthquakes that might just leave little cracks, and the damage is harder to see, but there is still something wrong. And that's a lot of our population we would call like our walking wounded, basically our people that weren't necessarily told you have a brain injury and this could have ongoing symptomology for you. And so then those people tend to find us years after their injury and weren't necessarily told this is a brain injury, but something is wrong. And the really tricky part is these don't show up on CT scans. So mild brain injuries are cellular damage. So if I go and get a CT for a concussion, it is not going to show up on a scan. And that really kind of frustrates survivors. When we screen people for brain injury, they often want to go get a scan right away and they want to see their injury. And then when they go do that and it comes back clean or, very little damage, they think they're crazy, but they're not. It's still very valid and they still had an injury. It's just not that you can see it with scans. So possible consequences after an injury look very, very different from person to person, like I talked about before, when comparing them to snowflakes. But these are some general possible consequences. The biggest one on there being that fatigue and lack of awareness, because that seems to play the biggest role in their recovery as well as the biggest role in just their day-to-day functioning. So fatigue, very common after brain injury, and it's not just like a little bit tired, they're completely exhausted. And it is oftentimes there's primary fatigue from the injury itself, but then there's a secondary fatigue from basically kind of trying to keep it all together. Brain injury is a very unique disability area. I came from the world of intellectual disabilities before this, where those individuals were typically born that way and they don't know any different, where this is completely opposite. They were born typical and something along their development or even post-development disrupted their normal brain function, and now things are different. So they have to kind of find this new normal. And that's really, really hard for people. So there's a lack of awareness and a secondary fatigue as well from that occurrence. A lot of people think, I can go back to work full time after, a severe injury, and they don't realize that now they're going to be so fatigued and maybe their skills aren't exactly where they were before. And so there's kind of a really hard emotional and behavioral change that comes with that. That acceptance and that finding that of that new normal. And the emotional behavioral stuff we hear mostly reported from the people that knew them before their injury. So we don't know our survivors prior to, so we can't speak to it as well, but the caregivers and their families will report very, very different. They look the same, but they act different. Brain injuries are extremely invisible. I could line up 10 of my clients and 10 people I find at the mall, and you guys wouldn't be able to tell the difference who has a brain injury and who doesn't. It's very, very invisible. Cognitive changes are probably one of the biggest, is the biggest problem and issue for most survivors. Cognition it's different than your IQ. So your IQ doesn't really change after brain injury, but your cognition changes significantly. So you often need information presented to you differently than you did before. And a lot of our people report that they feel like they're moving through fog, or they just feel different and tired and sensitive to different sensory, like lighting and different things like that. And then finally, physical changes, which usually resolve themselves like in about 6 months to a year. So people tend to kind of think that everything resolved itself in that 6 months to a year. But unfortunately, that's not the case. The other areas remain. It's just those physical ones usually kind of can be less noticeable. And I've had a lot of survivors say, I wish I had something physical that you could see so that people knew that, you know, there is something kind of wrong or up with me and that I'm not functioning at my normal anymore. But physical stuff involves like headaches, seizure activity, gait changes, that kind of stuff. So here's kind of a really long list of all of those physical, cognitive, and emotional and behavioral changes. A lot of people look at this and they're like, oh, well, I could have brain injury. I have some of this stuff. But the thing is they have something from each category and typically every single day. So it's not just every once in a while. This is a daily chronic condition. Just like us, if, you know, without brain injury, if we sleep fine and, you know, eat right and have a good, we'll probably have a lot of good days, but one night of bad sleep or an argument with someone, couple days of eating bad or drinking or using substances can really change all of this as well. So again, we consider brain injury to be a chronic condition, and actually it was just made approved by what was it, Rebecca? CDC that said now it's considered chronic condition, or
Centers for Medicaid and Medicare.
Yes,
So
Medicare,
it's
Medicaid.
officially a chronic condition for insurance purposes with Medicaid and Medicare now.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So we have a thread with some survivors on it, and they're all really excited today and hooting and hollering, and they're glad that that's being acknowledged. So really, a lot of our role is to kind of connect the dots and to teach other outside agencies how to connect all these dots and the people that are supporting our survivors, because there's all these things that make up who we are as people, and they're often changed after brain injury. So we have to kind of connect the physical and mental with the cognitive, with the emotional, with the behavioral. There's just all these things that tie together to make that person a person. And so it takes a village, right? We say that a lot with little kids, but it's appropriate for this population as well. And so our job at the Brain Injury Network is to refer out to different resources and really utilize those that are experts in their field. So you know, like cognition, speech language pathologists are really the gurus in the best field for that. So we refer a lot of our clients to speech language therapy for that. So that's just one example, but we're kind of the bridge for people to appropriate services. So we really try to demystify brain injury to other professions. Once a month, we teach Introduction to Brain Injury and Cognitive and Behavioral Consequences online to direct service providers, and I do this slide with them and we talk about, you know, you really don't have to know all the lobes of the brain. You don't have to know all the details and, you know, be a little mini neurologist. That is not what we are expecting at all. We just want you to know the basics and to know the impact that it has on survivors and how to try to make it better and empower them. And when people are told about their outcomes and they're made to this is normalized for them, it really empowers them, and we can teach them how to advocate for the correct supports. So many of our people are misdiagnosed with other things or kind of written off to, you know, you're just, you know, kind of crazy, or your mental health is the biggest problem right now, when it's usually like the brain injury was the contributing factor to that mental health. So if we can advocate for the correct support and the correct treatment for that, we can hopefully see improvements in all areas of life. This is just one example of a advice that we give to survivors, as well as the people that support them, their caregivers and the professionals around them. It's a mnemonic device, rowboats, and I think it's a really great one. I always encourage professionals and clients to have this posted up around their house or in their offices, but it's a good way to keep in mind the way to help modify information for survivors. A lot of the things that we do for them really aren't very complex and complicated. They're pretty simple. The R is for reduce amount of information. So delayed processing and attention, so a lack of attention, disattention is common after brain injury. So if we can reduce the amount of information we're giving people, it can help with kind of that overload and their comprehension and understanding of things. If we give one instruction at a time, so the O in rowboats is one at a time, people do much better, because a lot of times we tend to talk really fast at people and expect them to just act and do what we say right away. But sometimes, especially after brain injury, they're still processing the first instruction you gave when you're maybe on like the third one. And so they're just not tracking with you, and then they get blamed for being like non-compliant or lazy. But really they need you to slow down, and they don't maybe have the skills to ask you to slow down. W is written and verbal whenever possible. So we learn about 83% of what we learn comes from our eyes. Our eyes are a really critical component in learning. I always say when I present, could you imagine me doing this presentation without any slides? If I was just talking at you, that would be how I think a lot of our survivors feel a lot of times. Concepts are very abstract to them, and they need things made more concrete. And so if we can show them images and pictures and write things down for them, that helps them a lot. B in rowboats is for breaks are helpful. So I always tell survivors, you are not going to stay charged all day long anymore. Unfortunately, after brain injury, your fatigue, your energy allocation is different than someone without a brain injury. So you will need to recharge several times throughout the day. So we recommend brain breaks. They're 10 to 20 minute low stim. So low stimulation meaning low lighting, no sounds, no screens, just quiet time to get that brain to reset and recharge. And our adults that start using this later on in life report back that they feel so much better when they take their brain breaks on a regular basis. I think we're really good as a society of scheduling people on, but we also need to work on scheduling off time too and downtime. So I always coach clients of, okay, you're going to go to the doctor. When you get home, then I want you to take a brain break, because that's a very overstimulating environment to go to the doctor's office, and it's stressful and anxiety provoking and all of that stuff. O often is better. Routines help. So our brain loves routine and structure. And so when it knows what's coming next, it functions much better, and it can reduce a lot of our anxiety. So I tell people that work with survivors that, your session with a survivor should roughly follow the same pattern every time, so they know what's coming next. Even our direct service providers that are in the home with people, I suggest that, their shift roughly do the same thing every time. They should eat dinner around the same time, take medication around the same time. Just really helps to automate things in their day. The A is for asking the person to paraphrase and repeat. This is a good gauge of comprehension, or what did they understand? What do you maybe need to go back over with them? People are very surprised when they start implementing this, that, yeah, not everything is being caught by the survivor. So it really helps to have them do that, and then they can gauge and re-explain things or show more pictures if needed. The T is for take time, go slowly. A lot of our survivors have that delayed in processing, so they just need you to slow things down. I often pause after I ask a question of a survivor and give them, I count silently in my own head so that I'm not firing more questions at them. They always know what I'm asking, and then they can formulate a response. It just takes, about 20, 30 seconds for them to actually start speaking and generating that response for my people with delayed processing anyway. And then the S is simple and organized information is best. So some examples, I had a lady, and her words, dumb it down for me, she's like, don't use big words. Like, she gave the example of sibling. Like, we all know a sibling is a brother and a sister. And so if we use the word sibling, they have to decode that and think about that. But if we just say brother or sister, they don't have to do that. So if we can just use as basic information as possible without being offensive, that can help a lot. And then even organizing, labeling things, color coordinating, highlighting, just being really mindful of organization can help this population a lot. So Unfortunately, like we said, there is no cure for brain injury and it is considered a chronic condition. But there is so many things out there that people can do and feel relief from their symptoms. And that's really our job. So we have a really good cognitive symptom inventory that we give survivors of brain injury, and that kind of helps us determine where their areas of weakness are and where to point them to. And so here is what that looks like, at least the first page anyway. So the first thing on the screen you're looking at there, the left side, is our screening that we adopted and used from Ohio State University. Dr. John Corrigan and his team developed this. There's two versions of the OSU. This is the shortened version that we selected to use. It literally takes 5 to 10 minutes to implement, so very simple, and it is not diagnostic. So it is not, it's not giving them a diagnosis, but it is telling us that there is enough, evidence here to warrant further pursual of a diagnosis if they screen positive. So basically, if they say yes to any of these questions, it's considered a positive screen. The first question is getting at TBIs, at those loss of consciousness, like we talked about with that severity continuum, and as well as when were they first knocked out. So my guy yesterday that I screened, his first knockout was at 10 years old. So that is significant. The research shows us that if our injury happens before the age of 15, we are more likely to be involved in a cycle of failure. And he is very textbook. He ended up addicted to substances and a lot of meth use in his lifespan. And he fit right into that category there. Have you ever had a time with multiple repeated impacts? That's what number 2 is looking at. So those are looking at kind of more those multiple mild injuries, those people that played contact sports or maybe grew up in a household with violence. He also fit into that category, the guy I screened yesterday. He had many, many falls and different fights and things like that throughout his lifespan where he had multiple mild injuries. Number 3 is looking at drug overdoses. So those are those acquired anoxic injuries or being choked or strangled. So the gentleman yesterday had 20, he figured about 20 meth overdoses within his life. That's very significant. That's a lot of damage to the brain to lose oxygen that many times. And then the last one is more medical type things. So has a doctor ever told you, and then we read them off this list, epilepsy or seizures, strokes, tumors, all of those things I went over with you on that first slide that I talked about. So if they can say yes to any of those things, we consider that a positive screen. And if they screen positive, we then move on to this symptom inventory, which was developed by a neuropsychologist out of Denver. Her and her grad students developed this intended to be a placeholder for a full neuropsych battery. And we're going to talk about neuropsych and why it's important in a little bit, and then why there's a barrier in here in North Dakota to neuropsychs. But this has been really helpful at ND-BIN too. I think it gives us a why after we screen. A lot of places I will go and I will talk about screening and they will say, well, we used to screen. Like I remember distinctly my first presentation in Bismarck for CIT. So I do crisis intervention training for the Bismarck Police Department. I have a couple hours slot in that training. And the guy that leads that said, well, we used to screen for brain injury at the prison in Bismarck. And he said, but then we didn't do anything with it. And that's exactly the issue. So now that this exists, this symptom inventory exists, it's like the follow-up, the what's next. It gives us more to go off of and more guidance around like what's bothering this person and how can we help them rather than just, oh, you have a brain injury. So I think it's been really, really helpful for a lot of our clients. Just kind of some of the common referrals that we make just to kind of get you thinking about those. Speech therapy, they are the experts in many, many things, but in terms of cognitive and linguistic, that communication piece especially, they really should be called cognitive therapists. They're so good at that. A lot of people will say, well, why do I need to go to speech? I talk fine. And it's not about how they speak, it's about how they process language. So every once in a while, for a more severe injury, they will work on voice and pragmatics and articulation and things, but for the most part, when we refer them, we're looking for that cognitive piece. Occupational therapists work on ADLs, or activities of daily living, showering, getting dressed, just those things that we all tend to take for granted that our people struggle with, as well as accessing community. Rebecca and I this morning met with a student, an OT capstone student that will be working with us in the spring semester coming up starting in January. So we're very excited to have her on our team, and she'll be hopefully making us a cool project to use. Physical therapists, they help with kind of that mobility and strength and getting people to balance and be safe and go up and down steps, all that. We refer a lot to voc rehab, so that people can return to work after injury, because they typically will need some supports, but voc rehab, that's really their wheelhouse. We refer to them. We refer to human service centers to help people with that mental and behavioral health and kind of keep on that recovery journey. And then support groups are a lot of our referrals as well. We have several support groups throughout the state that meet regularly, and there's just a ton of research that shows that support groups really, really enhance the quality of life for our survivors as well as their caregivers. Usually there's a lot of them have caregiver groups that go along with the survivor group. So we take referrals from basically any source. The survivor themselves can refer, a professional can refer, caregivers, really anybody involved with the person. So going to our website, ndbin.org, and then clicking on client referral. And we have two versions. You can do an online form that's pretty simple, or you can download the PDF and fill it out that way if you prefer kind of more of that old school worksheet type way of doing things too. Okay, so now we're going to dive into kind of like what, as far as like Olmstead, the barriers and the things that we see that our clients struggle with the most. And so we're going to start with barriers that we see from an NDBIN perspective, and then we'll kind of give you some clients and different other perspectives. But we have a lack of providers screening for brain injury consistently. So I should actually know the exact year we started implementing screening, but I would say at least 2 to 3 years now, NDBIN has had a screening portal in place, an area where people can log in, and all of our screening materials are available. And we've trained many agencies on that, but there's not really, I wouldn't confidently say, one agency in North Dakota that's screening every single person that comes through their doors, which would be best practice, would be to screen at intake. We are very close to the DOCR in North Dakota screening on intake, and so that's going to be great, and we're going to catch a ton of people because statistically speaking, 87% of those, up to 87% of those involved in the criminal justice system have a history of brain injury. So we're going to catch a lot of people that way. But we really want to see more of those agencies screening everyone. It's right now they're screening those that they think have a history, but screening exists for a reason. It shows us that brain injuries hide in plain sight because of their invisibility. So we have to ask everyone the questions, and we can't just say, have you ever had a brain injury? Because that's not really how the general population talk. They say knocked out, or had my bell rung, or whatever their terminology might be, but it's probably not brain injury.
I will add really quick, Carly. And also another good thing was she said that we just we're really close to working with DOCR. We also have just this month, the Human Service Centers and the state hospital have built our screening into their new avatar system that they're using. So that should be rolling out soon. And for all moving forward, all substance use disorder programming in the state is putting it in the administrative code that they have to be screening for brain injury as well. And so we worked with Behavioral Health Division on putting that into the administrative rules that they had to, when the RFP goes out for applying for those funds, the agencies have to do brain injury screening. So that, as those new RFPs roll out, will be happening as well.
Yeah, super exciting. We tend to not get a lot of referrals from places you would think we would. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, so you work a lot with the hospitals, and not so much. So you would think that, you know, most brain injuries that go through like a Sanford or an Ultra or an Essentia would automatically end up on our doorstep, and that is not the case at all. So we have a lack of you know, that kind of that wraparound service, if you will, or that community follow-up and acknowledgement that we exist. We struggle following up after submitting apps. Like, so when we meet a client and maybe screen them, they oftentimes kind of end up in the wind, if you will, or we oftentimes struggle following back up with them. They might change their phone number, they might not have an email address. A lot of our population is homeless or transient in nature. And so that's been a barrier for us too, is just tracking that person down and finding them consistently and having a spot where we can get a hold of them. Nikki, our resource facilitator in Towner, was saying she just got a call the other day with someone and screened them. They screened positive, went through all the stuff, literally called them the next day and their phone number was already changed or off. And so it's like, it can happen that quickly where we lose track of people fast. So I joke that they all need like to be given a gizmo watch or something where they can follow up with us on their end. So from a provider perspective, some of the barriers we see, we have a lack of neuropsychologists in North Dakota. I don't have the exact number. I want to say there are 5 total in the whole state. Does that sound about right? We have 1 in Grand Forks, quite a few in Fargo, and a couple in Bismarck. But if you live in Williston, that means you're coming all the way, you know, down to Bismarck or over to this side of the state to get a neuropsych. And why that is important is because the neuropsych is the one that holds the keys to a formal diagnosis. So if our client wants to pursue a formal diagnosis after being screened for brain injury, they need a full neuropsych battery. And so travel is a barrier, time. So I live and mostly serve clients in the Grand Forks area. And so, for example, the guy I screened yesterday, he's been trying to get on disability he's got back stuff going on. But I said, well, this brain injury would probably help your case for disability too, if we can get you formally diagnosed. So we called to set up his neuropsych appointment, and it's, you know, 3 months from now. So getting him to remember that, I mean, I will try to support that, and hopefully his phone number doesn't change in the time of that, you know, appointment, so I can follow up and remind him about it. And getting him actually there can be a barrier for a lot of our people. Having insurance that covers it, that's really hard. Whenever I'm in front of high school groups, I'm like, a lot of high school teachers will have me come in and kind of talk to like medical careers classes, and I will say, please go into neuropsychology and then stay in North Dakota or come back to North Dakota. We have a lack of trained, consistent staff knowledgeable on brain injury and its best practices, and this we see across all the continuum. We see this in hospital settings, in nursing homes, and with direct service providers. I think we've made some good inroads with direct service providers, but we still have a lot of work to do in that area. Even like, you know, that rowboats thing that I just showed you guys, the small things like that make a world of difference for a survivor, but staff have to know about it and use it to see the advantage of it. Lack of available services in North Dakota and a lack of workforce trained. You know, I think a lot of our services look great on paper. Like I would say 1915I and is a great service that exists, and it's just hard to get people enrolled in. And I know at least like in Grand Forks, there aren't a lot of options for providers of 1915I. So I can get someone signed up, but then there isn't always somewhere for them to go with that service. And then we are seeing a huge influx of people with limited English proficiency working with the general population, or with our brain injury population. So For example, yesterday we hosted that introduction to brain injury and cognitive and behavioral consequences. And there was a huge group from Fargo. I think there was like 8 of them on, and their English was very, very limited. You know, we were reviewing very basic terms and words so that they could understand them in English. And so I would love to see some type of, you know, English classes or articulation even. I just can't imagine having a brain injury and trying to understand someone that's English is difficult to understand, and just how we can expect there not to be any behaviors from that. So I think we could do a lot of work in that area, because I think they're probably great workers, and overall it's a good population to work with, but we just need to help train them better. Some other barriers that we see, insurance requirements and restrictions. So a lot of our people end up getting discharged from therapies too soon. We hear it all the time where they plateau. And so then it becomes unethical for that insurance to be billed, like a Medicaid to be billed for their therapies. So they will get discharged. But we don't really see it as a plateau necessarily, but just a lack of probably understanding of brain injury. Even brain injuries often come with things like a lack of initiation, and so they look like they're being really lazy and they're not, and so it's kind of like a training edge of that therapy as well. The level of care is not sensitive to their functional and cognitive or behavioral needs. So a lot of our survivors, they walk and they talk. So then right away, that kind of eliminates them from qualifying for a lot of different things, when it's really their cognitive and behavioral that are lacking, and they need services that are robust in that. They don't necessarily need help with, you know, their day-to-day getting dressed and taking a shower, but they need help with, how do I get to the bus stop and then get myself to my job, and those kinds of things. There is a low income threshold to qualify for Medicaid services, so a lot of our people do not qualify for Medicaid. We feel like there is a lack of full continuum of care services for our people. Again, those walkers and those talkers, those people that kind of they're right in the middle. Like their adaptive skills are a little too high to qualify for things. And then we see a lack of options for those with behavioral or criminal justice type backgrounds. That happens a lot, and we're going to kind of get into that when we go into case studies. But I want to show you this slide because I think it's an important one that we can't not talk about with you guys. Is basically this, to me, this is unacceptable. So this is the population, the prevalence among special populations with brain injury. So general population history, if we just pull the general population, 12% of people have a history of brain injury, which is a lot of people even right there. But then if we just look at specific populations, such as the homeless, 50% have a history of brain injury. And about, I think it's 40% of that 50%, their injury was sustained prior to them becoming homeless. So it hasn't been an issue throughout their lifespan until they have this brain injury. And then there's this lack of knowledge of like cognitive and behavioral needs that ends up making them homeless. Behavioral health make up about 60% of brain injury population, or 60% of them have a history of brain injury. Criminal justice, you see 60% there, and I know earlier I said 87%. It just kind of, it really depends on the study that you look at, but we have seen studies as high as 87%. Even our neighbors in Minnesota did a study, and theirs came out at like 99%, and that was amongst their juvenile population. Juvenile criminal justice involved, 99% of them had a history of brain injury. And then intimate partner violence, 75% of those domestic violence survivors have a history of brain injury. So lots of people in need of people informed on brain injury and its best practices. So we kind of put together some case studies and tried to de-identify them, but these are local people that we've worked with that we feel like, you know, their stories are pertinent to Olmstead. We get brought into consult on a lot of times on rehab transition, especially from Transitional Living Center at the state hospital. So that I see as a positive. I like to think we have a pretty good relationship with that Transitional Living Center, and they know we exist and they utilize us when someone does have a history of brain injury, and we will kind of get brought onto that team. I was brought on to a team about 4 years ago now with a 24-year-old with a history of drug overdoses, and he now has been transitioned to rehab, an adult foster home, which is great. We love to see that. We worked with their staff. We provided training. We could consulted on ideas for structure, different things like that. But I guess my opinion is this young man is very capable. He's, young, 28 right now, and he's basically sitting, not doing much. He's just kind of hanging out in this house all day long. So I guess I would love to see him kind of push to do a little more within his community, whether it be volunteering or working with Voc Rehab. And he's just kind of like, no, and doesn't want to. And there's not really, the agency isn't really trained on like pushing for that kind of change. They're worried about, kind of creating behavior by pushing for change. But I would advocate that he needs to be stimulated and not just sitting around. There's a lot of survivors that get themselves in trouble when they're bored. And that's what I worry about, especially with his history of drug use, that he's going to get bored and try to go find drugs or something if he's not staying engaged. And so I just followed up recently with his HCBS case manager, and she's reported things are going okay. But I do think from our perspective, we tend to get called in to kind of put out the fires or to help for a while, and then we kind of get dropped off the case too. So we don't necessarily get continually invited to things, which I think we would like to see that change a little bit. And we'd like to continue to be a part of that person's team if something does come up. Another case that we had, we were referred to back in 2022. And again, it was a transitional living from that same referral source, basically from our perspective. But this person was moved into rehab setting with 24-hour in-home care in their own apartment. So that looks a lot different than the group home setting. It's more one-on-one. And there was a pretty rough year. He was with that agency for a year, and we gave a lot of trainings. We purchased some calendars and provided structure, and really worked hard on trying to get staff to understand his needs. And then I honestly can't even remember how we ended up finding out. I think it was LSS that contacted me after the fact, but we were never contacted, but he was dropped by the state as a rehab provider, and he was dropped by both the state and the rehab due to behaviors. And so LSS Minnesota social worker ended up taking over his case, and we honestly haven't heard. I don't know, where he's at today. When we last talked to LSS Minnesota, he was still in his apartment, but that caseworker from LSS was pretty leery about that continuing to happen. So again, kind of that ongoing communication we would really benefit from at NDBIN. We had a recent young adult. I think he was early 20s, plateaued in therapies. So like I said, that's a barrier that we see a lot. So was put into nursing level of nursing home care. His mother did not like the care he was getting at the nursing home, and I don't blame her. I'm sure it wasn't age appropriate at all. 20-year-olds don't really belong with 80-year-olds. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So she advocated for him getting his own apartment with 24/7 care. But now we're having problems with his direct service providers because, as mom reported, they don't know anything about brain injury and don't really know how to work with him. So now we will come in and try to do training and education on the back side of things, but it can get kind of messy when they're already established and living in the place. But we're going to try. I mean, it's not like we're not going to try, but that is a very common comment that we hear, is like they don't know anything about brain injury. They need training, they need resources and understanding of brain injury. These are some of our cases. These are quite a few cases that have a criminal justice or were on the sex offender registry that we got involved with. All of them needed placement. We had one gentleman that was one person that was homeless, 2 that were incarcerated, and 1 in community or with family. NDBN advocated for removal from the registry with 1 person and got them into an adult foster home. Another person we were unable to get off of that registry, and they went back to the state hospital. 1 moved into nursing home level of care, and then 1 unfortunately died from complications of his medical condition. So he had mismanaged diabetes, and that's the referral from his primary care provider was for mismanagement of diabetes, and he ended up passing away 3 months after that. So it seems like the wait can be really long. Like that gentleman that was homeless, he was living in shelter and had a colostomy bag, which is, you know, that's a lot of medical type stuff right there. He had medication that he needed daily, and all of that was handled by the homeless shelter staff, which homeless shelter staff, that is really not within their wheelhouse to be giving meds and to be helping with colostomy bags and all of that stuff. They really went above and beyond for this guy. And finally, we got him into nursing home level of care, and he's doing fantastic now. And it's very appropriate setting for him. He's age appropriate for a nursing home, all of that. But we really see that a lot of the screenings utilized across the care continuum don't really address the cognitive needs. We get kind of focused on, you know, like Alzheimer's and dementia type needs and not their actual like functional care. Anything to add on those ones, Rebecca? I know you helped more with those than.
No, I mean, I just think it definitely is the complexity of the population, particularly those that have kind of that criminal justice, behavioral, you know, piece. I mean, like right now, we just this month had another one that, you know, the state reached out about and said, you know, due to behaviors, we're having difficulty finding placement. Do you have ideas, options? So that is probably one of those difficult pieces that we have. And then as a result, individuals kind of end up doing a lot of hot potato between like skilled nursing facilities, state hospital, criminal justice, homeless, like that they end up kind of revolving door amongst these things.
This last one, or I think this is, well, we might have one more too, but this individual had a history of being sex trafficked and was homeless, but did not meet level of care. So again, kind of that walking wounded, could walk and talk and just didn't qualify for a lot. Went to a local agency for services, and they tried really hard to get them to qualify for things, but it just didn't happen. And so they released back to the street, and then that individual died by suicide shortly after that. So you know, we have had several deaths. So the one with the diabetes, and now this one because of inadequate options for people's needs. I will say, I think this is a success story. IJPs, individual justice plans, we have started diving into those with support with protection and advocacy. And so we had a case that we worked together with PNA on for basically alternative consequences to their actions. So as long as they're, you know, their crime, you know, was a result of their injury or due to the symptomology related to their injury, we can advocate for an IJP, which a judge can take or not take. But we have seen some areas where judges are starting to see them and realize that it doesn't make sense for this person to sit in jail. So with this case, they got to do other things, not got to, but still had to. And it's probably actually harder than sitting, but they had a care coordinator assigned from 3 for Recovery, which was great. That helped immensely. That allowed them to access services appropriately and just really helped with a lot of that cognition piece. There's a lot of moving parts when someone even is involved with like criminal justice system, remembering, you know, meetings with your lawyer and meetings with P&A and meetings with us at Indy Bin and all of that, just coordinating all that helps a lot. They had to take our 7-week series, Living Life Fully After Brain Injury, which we stole from Colorado, and it's originally was called Be Ahead, Achieving Healing Through Education and Determination, and it's a psychoeducational curriculum that was written for the criminal justice involved population, and we just changed the name of it and kind of, you know, made it a little more North Dakota specific, but it's a really good course. I get a lot of compliments from people that, you know, even that go as far as saying like, this changed my life. Like now that I have some tools, we give out a really big packet that goes with it. And I had one guy approach me recently and he's like, that packet, like, I love it. I use it all the time. And thank you so much. And just there, you don't usually hear like, thank you for a bunch of worksheets, but it was really exciting to hear. So, yeah, it's making a big difference. And then monthly visits with their therapist. And as far as I understand, that person has not been reincarcerated or had any more problems since then. And this was about 2 years ago now. But yeah, just that number overlap between criminal justice and brain injury. I'm really excited and hopeful that this DOCR screening works out because I think it's really going to make a big difference. We recently hired Andrea Seiler, who's a speech pathologist. She's the one that lives in Lemoore but serves Bismarck, and she's really embraced this population as well. And she's been going to the penitentiary in Bismarck, and she taught Introduction to Brain Injury and Cognitive and Behavioral Consequences to all the peer supports that are incarcerated in Bismarck at the penitentiary. That went very well. They were a very good audience and very attentive and really ate up everything she was saying. And now she is starting, I think, like next week, Living Life Fully After Brain Injury with that same group. And so that'll be really helpful as well. And then we're hoping what will happen is those guys that then end up counseling peers with brain injury can recommend the course and also use the tools that they're taught to help their peer. There's some of our references and all that, but I will stop and see if anyone has any follow-up questions for us at all.
Hey Carly,
Hi.
I do, this is Nathan Swihovic. I just wanted to thank you for this. And something that I don't know how many people know about, but I had a stroke when I was 32. And so one of the things when I came to the labor department was there was a part of me that said, and luckily I mostly recovered. I have a blind spot up here, but it was amazing what I couldn't do, what I couldn't remember. I couldn't read. I couldn't remember names. You know, it was and it lasted for several hours. And when I got to the labor department, I remember thinking, at least if I can look at a positive of it, is like I understand what that can be like for people. So it was really, you know, it was really a moving moment to have to go through that and understand what people you know, less fortunate than myself endure constantly, not just, you know, luckily I got out of it okay. But, so I really appreciate everything you guys do. It was interesting to watch hear the statistics and some of the things you guys work on. So appreciate everything you covered today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And yeah, I think you're so right that like it's that support system piece, right? Like I assume you had a pretty good support system too in your recovery. You had access with insurance and all those good things. Well, a lot of our people just don't have that good people, the family members to fall back on, or, you know, that insurance and that good job and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really unfortunate, kind of the way things can go. Thanks for sharing. I'm very young to have a stroke. I'm sorry that happened. You're doing great though.
My wife might disagree with that.
We're always kind of unsafe. Don't take that as the brain injury.
The funny story, when I got back from an appointment that I had to go under, and so I was coming out of the anesthesia, and I asked her about 27 times, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, it was that many times. I was so hungry, and I was cooking eggs, and I asked her 27 times if she wanted me to make her an egg, and she was so patient. But you know, she's like, I just answered this 12 seconds ago, and so now that's an ongoing joke in our house. But I always said at least 27 times I offered to make you food. So, you know, that's a really good win for me.
Good. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Veronica, I see your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. So with the Interim Health Services Committee, doing some deep diving into brain injury services during this interim, are there certain things that you're hoping they address? And then I know we have a couple legislators on the call that are also on that committee. Are there any plans in the works to be moving something forward?
Yeah, I can address that. We have over the last year contracted out with the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators to do our system study and sort of look at that. A lot of the things that have come that we addressed in our barriers today were also out of that system study. So they will be giving, that group will be giving their final report on I don't know, the 16th, September 16th, I think is their next committee hearing. I would definitely say that the primary push is that improvement of like access to care, particularly that need for a community-based behavioral health community criminal justice option. That is something that we are combining efforts with. There is a long-term care psychiatric services work group that's also come together that we're a part of, and they really have also identified that as a need. So as far as for any big like legislative pushes this next session, we're kind of combining efforts with that group of looking at where are gaps in need as far as just developing services for that population, whether it be brain injury or any type of neurodivergent condition. So, you know, the need's been identified also within like the autism population, within developmental disability, within aging, all of that need for that overlap between kind of psychiatric care and physical condition support care. So we're kind of combining efforts with that group as well.
Wally, you're talking, but I can't hear you. I'm muted, but you put it in the chat, maybe? Yeah, I'm not hearing you. I'm seeing you, but did we completely lose him? He's gonna come back in.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say definitely, as Carly said, we wish we were involved more. So if one thing, definitely yourselves as an Olmstead Commission, but also all of you in your different random realms, please always feel free to reach out to us and involve us in cases. Whether it be, individual cases, always willing to provide, that technical assistance, that piece. Particularly Carly does a lot with our behavioral supports for in community. Any students that you're working with under the age, that school age, Carly does come to us previously with 10 years experience in the special ed system. So really is phenomenal with working with IEPs for our students with brain injury, those pieces. So, on that individual case by case basis, but also when looking at systems and helping develop systems. Obviously, we are working with brain injury, but we are a low population state, which means even though it is our population and we absolutely love the brain injury population, we're also aware that we're not going to be able to develop a completely siloed brain injury service system. So a huge piece of what we try to do is integrate brain injury into all the other available services and systems in our state. So Wally is back, but I also see that Deneen has raised her hand.
Yep, I do. Carly,
Yeah.
one question that I have, we had a mom that called actually yesterday who their son has a diagnosis that really relates to a brain injury. Right now they're going to private school, but once privates that will only go till 6th grade. So mom is looking for some kind of a curriculum for him for homeschooling. Is that something I could send you to her?
Yeah, I'd love to help with that case. Yeah, absolutely, for
All
sure.
right.
Yeah,
All right,
never a fee. I don't know if I said that. We don't charge for anything. So, I mean, just Deneen, just fill out that referral form or even shoot me an email. Either way, you can do that. We can get in touch with them.
Okay,
Try to help. But yeah, that private school stuff gets tricky. It's a lot different system, but yeah, happy to try to help and research that with her. Yeah, for sure. Wally, you want to try again? I don't. Not hearing you. I don't know what the deal is. Can you type it in the chat, your question, or your?
I can wrap it up if anybody has any other questions for Carly or Rebecca. Thank you so much. Appreciate the
Yeah,
great
thank you
information.
guys. We were glad to come, and yeah, this is a good group to be in front of.
The only other agenda item that we have is public comment. Anybody has a comment? Always a very difficult job, but thanks for doing it. Not hearing any public comment, I think Nathan will have to officially end the meeting since I am not in that capacity. So Nathan, if you want to do that.
You are putting me on the spot, Jana, but and I'm less familiar with the meeting rules and as probably some of you, but I think with that we'll just close the meeting if we go to have no other items on the agenda. So thank you everyone for coming and attending, and we'll see you guys at the next one because I think most, if not everyone's going to be here. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.